use, stuff that is currently being taken over by the state from local jurisdictions. You can learn more about it at their website. There's going to be a new website shortly, but right now the website is www.communitiesforchoice.org. It's going to be a huge lift. It's going to take lots of volunteers. Got to get like 1,300,000 signatures, and it's going to cost, maybe $8 million to get it on the ballot. So it's a big lift. At sometime in the future, one of the proponents of the initiative, one of the 6, is San Francisco's former planning commissioner, Dennis Richards. And at some point, he can attend a future CSFN meeting and answer all your questions, give you more details. In the meantime, I know some of you are familiar. It's easy to get to Livable California. We've got an initiative tab on that. And on that tab, there's a couple more. There's a link to the initiative site. There's a link to the complete text of the initiative and a place to donate, because the initiative is going to need lots of money. So that's kind of the announcement. I don't know if Mary, if you've got any questions, but that's kind of straightforward for now.
Actually, thank you very much, Rick. I did hear from Dennis, and he will be available in October to speak to us. So we'll have to figure out how we want to fit him into the schedule, or November. He said he's open in October, November. So we'll be talking to him very soon. And I so appreciate your coming on, Rick. I'm going to send my check soon.
Okay.
Now that I know where the checks are supposed to go. So I hope people will consider also supporting this initiative, which we definitely want to get on the ballot, and we definitely want to pass. Otherwise, you might as well be the state, right? So thank you, Rick. And I guess, is Charles here yet? I don't see Charles. Okay. Well, we could start with Stephen. Do you want to start the program, or should we announce anything else ahead of time? I'm trying to think. Charlie Perkins, hi. I was talking about Charles Head, actually, wow. But that's okay. I think well, I'll let Steve just start if you're ready. Are you ready, Steve?
You're on mute, Steve.
Yeah, you're on mute. I'm gonna mute myself now, so you can have it.
Great.
So, did you mean it to be me, Stephen Gorski?
I'm sorry, Stephen Hill is gonna.
Oh, that's what I thought you meant. I'm waiting. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mary. It's a great pleasure to join you here at the Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods, which is a group that I know has been around for decades in San Francisco, has played a key role in so much of San Francisco neighborhoods and land use issues and all sorts of issues. So I'm glad that you're interested in this topic of the Great Highway and then other transportation land use issues about JFK and Martin Luther King. And just, it seems like there's so many that are coming up and cropping up, and they all share a certain a shared interest in that. As they start closing off streets, we're seeing that different people, different groups of people are being hurt differentially by this. And it seems to be that they basically took advantage of a pandemic and the reasons for closing off these streets, and then did this quick, slick pivot to suddenly say, well, the pandemic is not really the reason anymore, but it's such a great idea, we should just keep these closed. And without a huge amount of public input, the public input that has been allowed has been within very constrained limitations impacted by the data that the city agencies will even allow the public to see. Some of our people in our group, the Great Highway Alliance, a couple of data scientists have been doing research and doing sunshine ordinance requests and getting data from the agencies that they're not releasing to the public. Some of the data doesn't match what the agencies are saying. So there's so many different components to this that it's really, it's been taking a while, I think, for people in the neighborhoods to get our arms around it, to figure out how to even respond. And so I thought I would just give a brief overview of some of these issues. And there are people on the Zoom call who also are extremely knowledgeable about these things, have been following these issues for a while. So, I won't talk long, because I think other people have a lot to offer in this regard. But I mean, the thing that when it comes to the Great Highway, when they pivoted from the pandemic, the first reason they used was this is about climate change. This is about the managed retreat from the coastline. And of course, this is all hogwash, because, we can see the traffic, the bumper to bumper traffic. Is it possible to use the shared screen facility, Mary?
Yeah, you should just be able to click on it. It should
Okay.
work.
Let me try that, and just give me a moment here to, let's see, where am I? Well, maybe I'm not gonna be able to find it. I just wanted to show some photos for those people that haven't seen the backed up traffic on the Sunset area.
There are plenty of pictures on the Open Great Highway that
Yeah,
everybody's doing to,
exactly.
highlight that. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so maybe rather than taking them, where
There
is?
should be a bright green share
Wait,
screen.
I think I got it. I've got it now. Here we go.
Okay.
Can you see that? Did that open? No?
Yes, it's open.
Yeah.
You want to make it bigger?
Can you see that? Okay, there we go. So this is traffic on the Great Highway North. This is north of where they shut off the Great Highway to automobiles. And so all this traffic then is taking a left-hand turn on Lincoln Way, and 4 blocks away is my house, where they zoom past, at all hours, all great numbers, bumper to bumper, making huge amounts of noise, not stopping at stop signs, even at the one at 45th and Lincoln, where there's a children's playground. This is just, on the type of traffic we're seeing. And then the flip side of that is, let's see. So this is the other side of the enclosure. We've taken to calling this the Great Nobody, because there's nobody on it. This is all these cars are sitting there watching nobody on this road that used to be the one they could use. And of course, you can see in this photo the fog, and anybody who lives out here, and apparently many of the people, including on the Board of Supervisors, aren't aware of it. Oftentimes the traffic, the weather out here is really not that conducive to riding your bike or taking a walk unless you're really bundled up. And so that's, then we show you another photo. So then we, this is great. So Vid, I don't know if you were responsible for this, but this shows an aerial view where you can see the stark difference. The cars here turning onto Lincoln, and nobody on the Great Highway, the Great Nobody, where these cars used to be able to go. That is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, that's the picture right there that tells it. And the final photo I'll show you is also, it's not just the Great Highway, but this is Chain of Lakes Drive in Golden Gate Park. So this is, supposed to be one of the jewels of our park system. Basically, they have taken a highway and tried to turn it into a park, and failed to do so, as I'll reveal in a moment. And then here they've taken a park and turned it into a highway. So, this is the state of policy on this. And it makes so little sense that it's almost, you can't help but pull your hair over how foolish it is, and how our own representatives in District 4 and in District 1 have been weak voices to oppose this. Occasionally they've made some changes, in response to the politics, but it's really hard to know at this point what they even believe about this. So this is not about climate change. When cars are in bumper to bumper traffic like this, any expert will tell you this is horrible for climate change. And one of the people in our group has made an estimate that this is increasing the amount of carbon about 8 to 15 carbon tons per day. Because when you have cars that are taking 20 to 30 minutes longer to get anywhere, or if they're even just traveling 2 miles longer to get anywhere, that's how much carbon you introduce into the environment. So that's point one. This is not about climate change. Point two, this is really bad for working people on the West Side. This is about people getting to work, going to school, going to doctor's appointments, grocery stores, about people commuting to the VA from the southern part of San Francisco. It's about people from District 1 going, commuting to the peninsula. I mean, ironically, these policies are turning District 1, the Richmond, into a transportation island. It's going to be very difficult for anyone in the Richmond to get anywhere, no matter which direction you go with these sorts of closures. And frankly, I think this is political suicide for Connie Chan. She has raised a little bit of objection to the Great Highway, but now she's, also doing some things I think we have to really call her on, having to do with JFK and MLK Drive that I'll talk about in a minute. So, we know that approximately 550,000 drivers per month are using the Great Highway, and some of them have passengers. So, a good 750,000 people a month are using the Great Highway in pre-pandemic times. And and we know that at its height, about 144,000 bicyclists were using the Great Highway. But actually, we did a Sunshine Ordinance request for documentation that the Recreation and Parks Department fought for 2 months. But we finally got the data. What it revealed is that there's been a huge drop-off in the use of the Great Highway by bicyclists and pedestrians. It dropped from a high in January of 2010, 2020, it dropped about 58% by May of 2021. And so and again, the weather is chilly, it's foggy, it's gray. It's no secret why this would be happening. And any of us who live out here know this. So basically they've decided we're going to take an area that where 750,000 people were getting up and down north and south on that. And we're going to hand it over exclusively to bicyclists and pedestrians, a handful of them to use, keeping in mind that this area wasn't exclusive to cars before. Bicyclists and pedestrians had a path. I think it's fair to say that path in some ways was inadequate. I think with a redesign of that area, we could make a wider bicycle and pedestrian area for them and still allow traffic going both ways. I mean, if you look at, for example, Golden Gate Bridge, you see how much distance is between the north and southbound lanes. There's really not that much, and people, drive it all the time. And we have this big wide berm between the north-south lanes, and we probably could have that berm, and we probably could have the berm that's between the cars and the bicyclists as well, and just create more room there. So what I'm suggesting that there is room here to look at this with new eyes, do a redesign, and come up with something that works for both. But this is not good enough for apparently the bicyclists, of course, but even for what we can tell from Gordon Marr, because I've suggested these things to him and I've seen no movement at all. Connie Chan, there's been a little bit of movement. We did meet with her about a week ago, and she certainly was friendly and asking questions and giving her thoughts. But again, I'm not seeing a whole lot of innovation, a whole lot of really solid policy chops coming from our West Side representatives, unfortunately. And this is a big problem, because as we talk to other members of the Board of Supervisors, for example, Aaron Peskins told me he's going to defer to Connie Chan. We also met recently with another supervisor who said they're going to defer to the West Side representatives. And our West Side representatives, unfortunately, are not strong enough and don't have a vision that's really going to be helping us. So the other problem that we've been dealing with, as many of you know, has been the bias of the city agencies. It's pretty obvious that these city agencies know what they want. They want permanent closure in all these places. In fact, Phil Ginsburg was just quoted in the Chronicle not that long ago in terms of JFK and basically saying, what's taking so long? We know what we need to do here. We need to shut things down. And so there's no attempt on the part of these agencies to be objective, fair. They say they're soliciting input, but they're only soliciting the input that will get them the data they need to support the conclusions they've already come to. And one example of that is they did a poll, a survey that claimed that 52% of people in the Sunset are in favor of Great Highway closure. And it wasn't until you looked deep into that report and, tucked away where you could hardly find it, where it told you the methodology for how they found the people to participate in this in this survey. And it was basically, you had to go to their website, you had to be on their social media feed, or you had to be on their email list, and then you were notified about this survey. Well, I mean, how many regular people in District 1 or District 4 or District 7, visit those websites or are on their feed or any of these sorts of things? It's just ridiculous. The only ones who are, of course, are the professional organizations like the SF Bike Coalition, Walk SF, and they can alert all their members and then come up with this completely skewed result. In the meantime, our group has done yeoman's work in gathering 14,000 signatures. I think it's over 14,000 at this point, saying that we should reopen the Great Highway. And so, I think, again, I think Gordon and Connie, two people I've known for many years, and they're good people and they're well-meaning, but they are flirting with political suicide here, in my view. And, I don't know what's going to make the light bulb go on for them. And also, as I mentioned, we've seen declining use on the Great Highway by bicyclists and pedestrians, except I will note that they will be apparently turning out sometime this week to taunt the police with civil disobedience by blocking the Great Highway during commute time. And, the police seem to be taking a hands-off approach. There was some the city agency that I think DPW that came and removed some of the spray painting they did on the Great Highway. So maybe finally the police will do something to clear this road. But if not, this is a big problem, because the more they do it and the more there's no consequences, the more of them will come out here and do it. It'll just become a great fun thing to do, to go, taunt the drivers and block traffic. So that's the Great Highway. Now, the other part of it is JFK Drive. Let me just pull up a map here real quick. If I can find it, give me a moment. Okay, can everybody see that? Now, is there a way, can I zoom in on any part of this, or is this a static image? Let me see. Does that zoom in? Oh, cool. All right, so here we have JFK Drive.
It's not showing up.
I think maybe you're sharing the wrong screen.
It was there for a couple seconds and then it went away. And every individual can make it bigger by taking their fingers and opening up, it says.
Okay, I'll stop the share and do it again.
I think you double click on it.
Can you see it now?
No. Can you double click on the, you're not getting the picture into the frame.
It's a PDF. Is that a problem with,
Shouldn't be.
No,
No.
you're sharing
Or-
Windows. You're sharing Windows Explorer, or we see your file list.
oh, okay.
So you want to open that up by I think you have to double click it. Can you double click that?
I did.
No.
Let me try it again.
Share your whole screen.
Okay, maybe, okay, that's not it.
There
Yes,
you go.
There.
okay,
Yay.
cool. All right. So there are some competing plans for JFK. There are three proposals that have been put out by, I don't know if it's SFMTA or Rec and Park, but they're one and the same on all this, so it doesn't matter. So one of them would revert to pre-pandemic, where the road would be open to cars except on what is it, Sunday, and then occasionally on Saturday. And then another plan shuts it down completely to cars, and then a third plan would allow cars to enter here on 8th Avenue, which you can see here up in the upper kind of right-hand corner. And then you could take a right heading west, driving out towards the ocean, but only half of that would be open. Now, I couldn't quite figure out, does that mean you can only drive in one direction, or they're somehow going to share it in both directions? And the other half of the road would be for bicyclists and pedestrians. And so this is considered the compromise, which of course Heather Knight panned completely. And then Connie Chan has her own plan that, as far as I understand it, it also opens up 8th Avenue, but it allows cars to drive across the street and to be able to drive into the museum loop here, so you can drop people off. And that one, both some of the supervisors in Rec and Park and SFMTA have panned that idea. They said, once you allow cars to cross JFK, then they're impeding bicyclists, and that's of course is you know, in their world is a evil thing to do. And so Connie Chan has not gotten a lot of support for that plan. And you know, again, here, it's about access. I mean, you have a supervisor, President Shaman Walton, who is basically saying, like, you know, people who don't live near the park and have to drive to get there and aren't, for whatever reason, can't bicycle, that they are going to be really hurt by this. They're, you know, public transportation, let's face it, in San Francisco, it's not very good, especially depending on where you live. So getting from District 10, from Bayview Hunters Point to the park, probably would take a good solid hour on public transportation. And you know, some of them have tried to say, well, they're closing down places, you know, streets and parks like Central Park in New York and in Paris and other places. Like, yeah, but they have a real public transportation system there where you actually can get to the park on a, you know, I mean, in New York City, on both sides of Central Park, you have trains that run right up the perimeter of the park, and the museums are right on the perimeter of the park. So I mean, they're comparing apples to oranges and hoping that San Franciscans are just too ignorant to know that this comparison makes no sense at all, because we don't have a real public transportation system. And you know, unfortunately, this Board of Supervisors, as progressive as it is in many ways, has not done a whole lot to start putting away a huge amounts of money to boost our public transportation system. So, you know, the JFK closure, I mean, in my view, it's the issues are the same. It's about access. It's about equity. It's not necessarily about people commuting to work like it is on Great Highway, but it's about who will be able to have access. Is it just the people that live around the park? Or how will people from the outer parts, the outlying areas of San Francisco, get access to this park? I think it's going to be extremely difficult for them. And I think it will be extremely difficult for the museums to have sufficient you know, users of that facility to keep it financially solvent. So there's a lot of issues here that really haven't been vetted very well in a lot of the public hearings. You just have Shaman Walton, who's been kind of a lone voice. And so I think that, you know, people like him, leaders like him, are looking for organizations like ours to raise our voices and start saying, hey, we're not happy with this. We think this is not good enough. So then the other issue is MLK Drive. So what Connie Chan has proposed is a bike path to the sea. And that's what this actual whole video PDF is showing. So it would start here, and it would, I don't know, when I move this, do you all see it moving as well?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so it would go all the way to here. So it would come up JFK Drive right about here. It would, you know, there would be cars on this road here, so the bicyclists would have to make their way here, sharing it for about 200 feet with cars, but then they would use this middle drive that currently is already closed down They would come all the way down here to MLK Drive, where then MLK Drive would be closed as it is now. I mean, the problem with this, again, District 1 has been turned into this transportation island. And it's not just because of the Great Highway. It's also because of what they've done to Chain of Lakes Drive. It used to be when you came out of Chain of Lakes Drive to get to the Sunset, you had 5 ways to exit the park. You had left, right at MLK, you had straight at 41st Avenue, and you had left, right on Lincoln Way. And ever since the pandemic, they have closed off 3 out of 5 of these exits. So the only ways you had was left, right on Lincoln Way. They basically forced everyone onto Lincoln Way. So people who used to use MLK going east to get on Sunset Boulevard, that has been closed off for some time. During the pandemic, people were working at home, wasn't a big deal. Now, this is contributing mightily to the bumper-to-bumper traffic on Chain of Lakes Drive. And also they've closed off to the west. It remains closed. That's the way you used to get to Great Highway, get to the outer Sunset, 47th, 48th Avenues, all of it closed off. Now, my little secret is I live right here, 45th and Lincoln Way, and I'm over here a lot. And let me tell you, in the nearly 25 years that I have lived here, there has never been a problem with cars, bicyclists, pedestrians sharing MLK Drive because it's a big, wide road. There's hardly ever anyone parking on it. And when everyone had 5 ways to get out of the park, it meant that there wasn't that much traffic along here in either direction. It's closing off 3 of the 5 exits that have created a lot of this Chain of Lake Drive bumper-to-bumper traffic, including the closure of the Great Highway. So I think even if we open the Great Highway, you are still going to see a lot of bumper-to-bumper traffic on Chain of Lakes Drive because so many people are trying to get to Sunset Boulevard here, and they're also trying to get to the other parts of the outer Sunset. So, this is something I think also, I mean, I've mentioned this to Connie Chan and her staff that this is, a terrible way to go. I mean, what's this fetish with having a path all the way to the sea? You could go here, and actually right here, it doesn't really show it very well, but right here, there's already a bicycle path that goes right through here. And it goes all the way down parallel to this, to the road. So, I mean, I don't understand why they are so keen on having this path, having these roads shut down when there was never a problem with cars and bicycles and pedestrians sharing that road. I've ridden bicycles on this road hundreds of times, and walked on it thousands of times, and there's never a problem. So again, they're making it hard for themselves in my view, and they're not really thinking through these issues and coming up with terrible ideas. So, I mean, I guess I'll just close with saying that, when you close streets, what we're realizing is that you reduce access with disproportionate impacts on different communities. And that is the common theme here with all of them. I had a quote from, they closed off Valencia Street, for example. And this also applies to safe streets. They want to have safe streets, and Gordon wants to have his, what's he calling it? The neighborways. Neighborways. So you close off 41st Avenue. What that means is there's more traffic now on 40th and 42nd Avenue. And the neighborway plan, they're actually wanting to talk about putting, greenways in there, putting like gardens and things like this. And so, I mean, imagine what's going to happen to the property values on 41st Avenue where the traffic is blocked. And now you've got a nice little greenway in there. And what compared to what's going to happen on 40th and 42nd Avenues. And I don't think neighbors are really thinking about this. They're not aware of this, but this is going to affect a lot. And the more streets they try to block off, the more this is going to happen to. So here's a quote from one person when they closed off Valencia Street. She said, "I live on Lexington Street, a narrow residential street parallel to Valencia Street that is now being stormed with bumper-to-bumper traffic diverted 4 days a week from Valencia Street to our street by the newly implemented shared space program. Residents from Lexington Street between 20th and 21st Street are now the lucky recipients of bumper-to-bumper traffic, noise, car horns, car exhaust fumes 4 days a week. There's got to be healthier ways to deal with this decision. That's going to happen on every collateral street that isn't the streets that they're blocking off. And, I think that, I think, the more people realize this, the more they're going to be furious, and that, there's going to be a movement arising here to shut some of this down. Being a San Franciscan used to mean that you were in favor of, among other things, access and equity. Apparently not anymore when it comes to land use. Now it means you ride a bicycle. That's what it's turned into. So anyway, the real solution, in my view, is an enormous investment in public transportation. And yet we know, even if they started today, it's going to take many years. So we're going to be fighting over this stuff for quite a while here. And, that was just a quick overview. And I know a lot of other people here have a lot of thoughts. Mary, is there anything else you wanted me to address?
I had a question, but I don't think I'll bother with it because I think I'm now realizing that the difference between Connie Chan's ideas and the other one is just like not important. So I don't even think we'll go into the details. I guess that's basically, let's see. Yeah, I guess that's basically it. I guess we should just see what other people have to say. I'm particularly interested in how this is affecting the people in the Sunset. I mean, I know how it's affecting. It almost sounds like what you said sounded as if they're going to turn the Richmond into Selma. Because what did they do to Selma? The first thing they did is they took out all the they took out all the cars, the parking, they densified it, and they basically turned it into an island of its own where you can't move about very easily. And it seems like we're being sequestered in our neighborhoods. It's like, well, you can go to your park, which is a block or two away. It's not really a park, but we're calling it a park, so you don't have to go to the park anywhere else. And, we'll charge you if you leave your neighborhood. And we'll charge you if you park on the street. That is, if your car's not stolen, whatever. So it sounds to me like what they're doing in the Richmond, if what you're saying is correct, is they're turning it into another island unto itself. And I guess one other thing I want to say is about the parking situation. As I recall, when people used to go to work downtown, a lot of people used to take the bridge or park in the park because they had free parking. They could park in the park. They could take the Muni to work. So you've got all these people that used to have this way of, supporting the Muni by taking the Muni to work. They can't do it anymore because they can't park in the park. Also, some of these same people used to take the Golden Gate Bridge, and that they were paying they must have been paying $16 a day or $18 a day to come over the bridge and then go back and forth on the Muni every day. So that's kind of what's happening to what the city's doing to its own income, and what the Muni and the Golden Gate Bridge and all that authority are doing to their own revenue. They're cutting it down by removing that parking option that people used to have. And I know about that because I used to work in the park, sort of, for a while at the museum. So anyway, that's what I have to say. I sort of see this as three different problems. And they're each deserve their own chapter. One of them is access. That's one big issue that people, care about. And the other is traffic and the effects it has when you start moving things around for no reason, sort of the same way they do at the Muni routes. And then the third is parking. I think parking has to be another element taken under consideration because they all three affect each other, and they definitely all affect the revenue that this Muni and other transportation systems are accustomed to getting. So I guess we could just ask for hands up or something, or let me check and see. Okay. I guess rather than my sitting here and looking at all the stuff, who wants to speak? Okay, Charlie, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charlie Perkins. I'm a member of the Open the Great Highway Alliance. And thank you, Stephen, for that excellent presentation. I think he did a real good job of illustrating the interconnectedness of all of these different things. It's like, you know, it's kind of like the push me, pull you. You close this road here and you create a problem in the neighboring street, and no one seems to care about that. But, you know, one thing that Stephen didn't talk about that that I have learned in the last, you know, 10 months or so since I've become involved in this effort is that everything in San Francisco that is transportation related, the best I can tell, is geared towards Vision Zero. We want to eliminate all auto fatalities in the city. That's our goal. And I've sat through many of these transportation authority meetings now. I've sat through many of these Vision Zero presentations directly, and you know, that's what they use to justify just about every action that they want to take. However, with the Great Highway closure and the closure of some of these other streets, it is undeniable that the streets are less safe, and the probability and the occurrence of traffic accidents goes up, undermining Vision Zero. When the Great Highway is open, you have, you know, a straight 2-mile shot with no cross streets, no intersections. And sitting through these Vision Zero presentations, I have learned that most accidents happen as cars are turning left or turning right over crosswalks, or, you know, somebody's blowing through the intersection and causing a wreck. You don't have that on the Great Highway. And, you know, I did a public records request to the trying to get accident data, and from SF Fire Department, I learned that there was a single response to a traffic related or a automobile related incident on the Great Highway itself during the 3.5 years leading up to its closure. There was only one. And now instead, you've got these 500 and however many thousand cars every month being diverted off of the safe route into neighborhoods, you know, where kids are playing, where there's a 4-way intersection at every single block, where cars are pulling off curbs and backing out of driveways, narrow streets with all sorts of visual obstruction. You're also forcing drivers to be in their cars longer periods of time, which, you know, as an insurance underwriter would tell you, more time in a car means more accidents. And you're forcing many drivers onto these more dangerous routes, not just the residential streets, but up Lincoln, up Sloat to Sunset Boulevard or 19th Avenue, all of which have, at least portions of which, are labeled high injury networks under the Vision Zero methodology, which means that they are, there's high incidence of accidents there. So, you know, I don't know why the story, this isn't a media story, why everything the city does transportation wise is geared to advance the concept of Vision Zero, except when it comes to the closure of the Great Highway. And when it comes to the closure of the Great Highway, we're simply going to ignore the fact and not talk about the fact. It's going to be kind of like the dirty little secret that we don't really care about Vision Zero. And Stephen had posited, you know, what is this fetish for closing down streets? You know, why is this happening? I've also, you know, come to the conclusion, my personal conclusion is that various groups in the city, such as the Bike Coalition and many of the supervisors, their true agenda is not safety. Their true agenda is not reducing auto emissions and climate change, but their true agenda is just to punish people who drive cars in the city. And that is, you know, I don't think there's any way to get around it when you look at the fact that the Great Highway closure and these other street closures increase carbon emissions undeniably, make the streets less safer undeniably. Yet, so why is that not the story here? Why is that not the story that that these efforts undermine everything the city purports to stand for, but do not matter in this one instance? Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I think I'm rambling a little bit, but those are just a couple of thoughts I had listening to Stephen.
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, Stephen Gorski, I guess your hand is up.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm an Outer Sunset resident for over 40 years. I've seen a lot of the changes that have gone on, and some for the good, but recently all for the bad. So I'll just touch on a few topics since Stephen gave such a great overview, as Charlie mentioned. So from a perspective of my seeing emergency response vehicles and personnel being inhibited in doing their job and saving lives when the highway is closed. I've seen even when it's when they have an emergency, they were expected to go to Sloat, and then they would open up the gate and they would proceed. But some of the cyclists are so militant, they rode in like a peloton, but instead of in a straight line, like a line of cyclists, they rode like geese in a V so that they couldn't get by. And they were, that could have jeopardized someone's life. So I'm concerned about that aspect of things. The second point I want to make is that by precluding only the privileged, by precluding everyone except the privileged who can afford to work from home, not have to commute to work, ride on their expensive bikes on the highway, they're inhibiting people, working people, from getting to their jobs, from using the highway for medical appointments. So I won't repeat more of that because that's been touched upon. The third thing is, I'd like to just mention that I have witnessed and I have photographs of these privileged few, I'd like to say mostly white males, in their expensive vehicles. I have Teslas, Porsches, Benzes, Beamers, unloading their bicycles, parking on the lower grade highway so they can ride on the upper grade highway, increasing traffic. And so I think further exacerbating the situation is this militant, quote unquote, group that likes to weekly have, quote unquote, civil disobedience, supposedly for climate control, but really it's to save their own private roadway. And they have about maybe 30 bikes, and they spread across the whole road and go about a mile to about 2 miles an hour. And I know this because my wife was in a vehicle stuck behind and was in back of them and has video of them doing this. And what I'm concerned about, even though I'm against what they're doing, is someone's going to get angry when they're going, and there's going to be an incident where people are going to be injured, if not worse. And I don't want to see that. I want to see that the multi-use path be used. It's really 16 feet wide. If they would maintain it, and we have photographs on our website for openthegreathighway.com, I believe, where there's photographs showing everyone using the multi-use path, cyclists on what they don't consider a bike path on the north and southbound lanes of the upper grade highway, but that's where they used to bike. And that's where they still bike. And there's some runners that are there, but the majority of runners, walkers, people with strollers are using, and cyclists are using, the pedestrian path because it can accommodate everyone. And the problem is Phil Ginsburg and Reckin Park. They don't want that. They want it close the highway. And so they don't like to maintain it. In fact, it took them maybe 5 or 6 years to do it once. And that was after we barraged everybody with emails about how despicable it was. So that's enough for what I'd like to say. And I will defer to others in the group, since we were invited to express some of the West Siders, the Outer Sunset people's position.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for a pen that works. Let's see. So Patricia, I guess you would like to speak?
Sure, thank you. I'm Patricia Eric. I've lived on the Lower Grade Highway for 36 years. I'm a retired faculty member from City College of San Francisco. And I just have to say, this whole thing is profoundly disturbing to me. Everything that you've heard so far from the two Stevens and Charlie are absolutely correct and true, every single bit of it. I bring a little bit different voice to this because I'm retired and I'm disabled. I'm a senior citizen. I can still walk with a rollator, but I'm definitely not able-bodied. And the bike lobby, in cahoots with these 3 agencies and some of the members of the Board of Supervisors, are totally ableist. And there's also a class distinction here too. I'm a member of Senior and Disability Action. The members are very diverse, a lot of Latino, Chinese, Asian, and Black, and they are all very, very much against this because they are working people. And this is entitled, privileged bike riders against working people. That's the way I see this problem. Now, I want to be very specific about data. I think Michael, where's Michael? There's Michael. He has a lot of interesting things to say about data. And I have my own little data report. The data that CTA, MTA, and Park and Recs have been coming up with are basically a pack of lies. They manipulate the data to make it appear to be in their advantage in a myriad of ways, like this 52% Sunset members in favor of closure. That I think, who mentioned that, was that, I forget who talked about that. But that data was problematic in its source, but also in the time. That data was acquired in November of 2020 at the height of the third pandemic surge. So it's meaningless, it's so moot. It's completely ridiculous. But anyway, getting back to the data, I live at Ortega. I'm home all the time. I'm looking out the window all the time. So I started keeping a tally, excuse me, of how many people I would see. I can see from Noriega all the way down to Pacheco. That's 2 long blocks. And every hour on the hour, I was writing, okay, how many noses do I see? People on bikes, people walking during the week. So I started counting, and then I added it all up and divided it in my junior high school math. And it's 5.3 people, either on a bike or walking, 5.3 people at any given time that I would, you would look out the window. The average was like 5 people with long distances in between them. There was not one person there that was being jostled around, like the Chronicle said. Nobody's jostling around for room. There's tons of room. You have yards and yards and yards ahead of you and behind you. You'd be there by yourself. Those people could so easily fit onto the bike path, which is 16 feet wide. This is just crazy. and the numbers that they're feeding to the public are lies. They're just lies. And so this completely
Garbage.
drives me crazy. Garbage, somebody say garbage?
That they're garbage they're feeding people, sorry.
Yeah, so, and I continue to do that every day. And the weather, all these people that think this is going to make a great park, they don't live out here. The weather is cold, it's windy, it's foggy, it's chilly, it's damp. 85% of the time, I tallied which days were cold or cloudy. 85% of the days are cloudy, and on and on and on. And it's just like we have to suffer. So this entitled small group of bike lobbyists can get their way. The Bike Coalition says on its website, we deserve this highway for our park. They consider it to be their park. We have no right to put a car on their park. They are so disgustingly entitled. It's just outrageous. One last thing, speaking for seniors and people who are disabled or partially disabled, we are at much greater risk out on the streets. If we want to go out and walk, we cannot sprint to the curb. And a lot of people, when they're driving around, in the neighborhood, because they don't have the great highway, they're upset, they're impatient that, they have to be on these narrow residential streets. And it's dangerous at every intersection. At every intersection, it's very dangerous for people like myself, older people who can't run out of the way. I still go walking, I still cross intersections, but every time I step into an intersection, I just, this might be it. And I try to be very careful, but, it's just so unfair to people in the Sunset and in the Richmond. And
Oh, okay. I think we're gonna have to go on to somebody else. Thank you. I will say one thing, just that's kind of related to what you just said, and other people might be thinking about it as well. There's this new law that's going to allow bicyclists to not stop at stop signs and red lights and all that. So how safe are people going to be dealing with bicycles cars can actually stop on a dime if they have to. Bicycles really can't. They'll fall over. So I don't know what the point exactly of allowing them to do that is. However, I think we should hear what Peter has to say, Peter Lee. Unmute yourself, Peter.
I'm pretty new to Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm very happy about the partial victory with the Great Highway. It's ridiculous to close it on Friday at noon. And I'd like to see it just completely open. My issue is really with JFK. I want JFK open. I'm sick of the thing being shut down, and I have been on, what's it called, that neighborhood thing?
Neighborhood Way or,
The-
next door?
Next door, yeah, next door. And I got a lot of response on that, and they said, well, next door said you should start a group because I was kind of big. So I started a group 2 days ago. I've been getting 100 responses a day, more than that. It's just a big flood, and people are pretty happy to talk about it and express, what's important to them, which is access. I'm hearing from a lot of seniors who can't get to the museum a lot and who miss it. A lot of disabled and handicapped who can't get to their park. A lot of people, families and people who used to be able to use the park, but now it's shut down. And so I just wanted to put that out there that this group is now up and big response.
Thank you. I've been seeing you there, so thank
Oh,
you very
nice.
much.
Oh, yay.
And It's
a quick-
interesting how some of us have really gotten organized on Nextdoor, and other groups of people have found it to be really difficult to do that. So
To do next door, yeah.
I'm gonna I think Michael is next. The Michael and Cynthia, and
Okay, can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah, I just have one or two points to bring up. Has anybody looked to San Mateo County to see what they think about this? I talked to a lady today when I was delivering signs, and she's been using the Great Highway for over 50 years. And she's ecstatic that it's open, but I mean, San Mateo County, a lot of people in San Mateo County use that road as well. So
Yeah.
that might be someplace that we can get to put pressure on the city. And the other, go ahead.
Actually, that's an idea, because one of our senator, or one of our assembly, I think our senator is actually partially in Santa Mateo County. So I was thinking along the same lines. Thank you for mentioning that. And also Marin. I mean, people actually commuted from Marin through that direction. So all those people are pretty heavily affected by it as well. But yes, you're right, the two counties. Thank you.
Sure.
Was that it?
Yeah, that's all I need.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So Michael, the next Michael.
Good evening. Thank you. So I'm also part of the Open the Great Highway group, and just kind of want to touch on a couple of things that Stephen and Charlie mentioned. Stephen mentioned it's taken a while to kind of get our arms around everything, and that's because there's so many facets to this, from traffic safety to impact on transit and climate change and recreational opportunities. So we've really looked at a lot of data in all of those areas. I'll talk a little bit about traffic safety. It's one of the areas I've looked quite a bit at. And I think, as both Stephen and Charlie mentioned, the Great Highway is actually quite safe. And despite the millions of vehicles that travel across it every year, there has not been a single fatality on the Upper Great Highway since at least 2005. So this comes from the city's Transbase database, which is publicly available. Anybody can go and look at this comprehensive traffic accident database. There has not been a single death on the highway from any source, bike, car, pedestrian, for at least 16 years. And in the city's reports, they acknowledge that there had not been fatalities on the road leading up to the closure. But in the public statements, some of the transportation officials said that they supported the closure for safety concerns. And they said because of the fatalities and serious injuries on the road, but there haven't been any. So they're misspeaking in public. People are taking them at their word because they're experts, but they're not digging into the details. And the fact of the matter is, again, it's a very safe road, especially given the volume of cars that used it pre-pandemic. And as Charlie mentioned, the streets that most of the traffic will be diverted to are Sunset Boulevard and 19th Avenue, both of which, at least portions of which, are on the city's high injury network, roads that they deem to be dangerous. And again, the Great Highway is not part of the high injury network for obvious reasons. Very few accidents over the years, very few serious injuries, and no fatalities. Actually, closing the road has worsened safety, again, because you're diverting all this traffic to more dangerous streets, through residential streets in Stevens neighborhood, and through an existing park. One of the goals of the city was to reduce conflicts between cars, pedestrians, and bikes, but that's exactly what they're creating in Golden Gate Park by literally shifting thousands of cars every day on Chain of Lakes Drive, which is a narrow winding road, was not meant to be an arterial, but that's what it's turned into. And it crosses both JFK and MLK Junior Drives, which, as everyone knows, are heavy recreational corridors. So they're actually increasing potential conflicts between cars, bikes, and pedestrians. So safety is being worsened for everybody as a result of the closure, or if it was to be reclosed. I'll touch on just a couple other areas real quick here to give other people time to speak. Stephen talked about climate change. And again, this isn't about climate change. A lot of the proponents for the Great Walkway talk about climate change. But if you look through the city's reports, Nowhere do they discuss or analyze the impact of the closure on greenhouse gas emissions. The word isn't even mentioned anywhere in the city's reports. They don't look at it, they don't analyze it, they don't talk about it. What they do talk about is the strategy of so-called managed retreat, right? So climate change is happening, we need to prepare for it, we need to prepare for rising sea levels. And they refer to the Ocean Beach Master Plan. I don't know if many of you are familiar with it, but this plan was published a while back. It had a number of recommendations, one of which was to employ a strategy of managed retreat for the Great Highway, which involved narrowing the width of the road from 4 lanes to 2. What the city didn't mention, though, was that that recommendation was actually removed from the plan. So it actually no longer exists. If you go to the SF Planning website, there's actually a line stricken through that recommendation. So they refer to a recommendation in the plan that no longer exists to support closing the Great Highway. And they also don't, kind of dwell on the fact that the recommendation itself was not to close the road. It was simply to narrow the width of it to 2 lanes. So it's not even consistent with the recommendation that, again, no longer exists in the Ocean Beach Master Plan.
Could you write that up and send it in a note? Do you have the email to send it? I'll put my email in the chat. That would
Or I
be.
can get it from Stephen as well, yeah.
Oh, okay, you could do that. Okay,
So yeah, I mean, I'll let some other people take over unless anybody has any questions.
okay. I would like to say, let Renee come in next and then Jean will be next.
Okay, hi, I'll come in. I have to say, so far, I completely agreed with everything that everybody's discussed, first of all. And it's very refreshing to see that, or hear, I should say, how many people are really for opening up Great Highway all the time. As the master planning noticed, they've had different iterations of it, none of which worked. Closing Great Highway doesn't work. I'm a native out here. My house was built in 1928. My family's been in this house since 1938. I'm blessed enough to have, inherited the house and bought out the family and be back in the neighborhood, and such. So I've been here for a long time. I'm old, but it's just ridiculous. And nobody's ever called it the Great Walkway. Okay. I wish these people would just stop. I have neighbors down the street that, oh yeah, they've got their sign in the window because I had my sign in the window, and they're like saying what a pain in the butt is to walk their dog. I said, what's a pain in the butt about walking the dog when the Great Highway is open? Well, the dog can't run. I said, Zach, you have to teach the dog not to run across the street then. Put it on a leash. It's not supposed to be running anywhere because the plovers and stuff, So it's like the little entitled group, and God love them, but this one friend, but come on, it's not about you or 2 or 3 people because you can't walk across the street, not train your dog. I'm so tired of like everybody's been talking about the little entitled group. It's a small segment of the population. And I myself am a cyclist. I have always followed the rules, ridden on the pathway, been polite. When I'm approaching people, I say to the left, to the right. I'm on the roadway. I'm on Lower Great Highway. And frankly, anybody who knows anything about anybody who thinks they're Lance Armstrong's practicing to cycle, that road is great to go fast on. But honestly, that's really not for a training road. It's a road that takes you from any place else you want to go riding in the city, over the bridge, whatever. So for these people to say it should be theirs, that's just absurd. It is it's a highway. It's why it's named the Great Highway, not the Great Parkway. The cycles they're just gotten out of control, and because they have too much money and power. And one gentleman I 1000% agree with, like watching them come down here with their cars and unload. I've gone Lower Highway with all the people out there signing about let's have Great Highway, and then right there in their driveway are several cars. So people, let's stop being hypocritical and be realistic. In this city, we are never going to have the proper kind of transportation like Europe or New York even, that allows us to get out of our cars or not have cars. They want people to come into the city and be tourists. That's used to be at least one of our biggest economic things bringing into the city. I can't think of the proper word, but
Tourists.
have cars, you cannot have cars to be in the city. I know people drive cars if they have to go someplace. Anyway, it's just absurd, and that's it. I'm not going to bitch anymore.
Thank you, Jean, and then I guess Pariah. Is that how you spell your name, pronounce it? I'm not sure. But
Thank
go
you,
ahead,
for
Jean.
Miriam, thank you very much. Thanks for organizing this, and it's just really great to hear so many other people, supporting the reopening of the Great Highway. I've been involved with this for months, on and off and back and forth, and it's just really encouraging to hear everybody's comments, and there's a lot of work that's been going into this. Stephen Hill, I have a specific question for you. You said that you'd been talking to Gordon Marr, Connie Chan, and maybe other supervisors. I wasn't sure if there were others, but what is your impression of why they want to close the Great Highway? We're hearing hundreds of, many reasons why the Great Highway should be reopened. When you challenge them with that information, what kind of response do you get? What's their resistance to doing the right thing?
Well, in Gordon's case, I remember he first contacted me in April 2020, saying he was thinking of doing this and asking, what do I think? I said, I think it's a terrible idea. I would at least do half and half, even during the pandemic. And he said, yeah, that's what my 11-year-old daughter said. And I said, yeah, she's a smart girl. You should listen to her. And he didn't. And so, if you look at other things that Gordon has done, he's created his own farmer's market and art market and closed down various streets. I've been trying to get him to articulate his vision, but nearest I can tell is he has this vision of the Sunset being some little Swiss village or something, instead of everybody cross-country skiing through the streets because there's no snow. We'll all be bicycling and walking or something. And, it is a lovely vision, I have to say, but it's completely impractical. And he hasn't thought it through, in my view. What happens to when you close one street and the other two streets on each side, suddenly, it's like squeezing a balloon and it just pops out somewhere else. And the cars are not going away. So honestly, at this point, we're trying to get a meeting with him as our group, the Open the Great Highway Alliance. He's being kind of squirrely about it. He wanted us to meet down on the Great Highway with him, which I'm open to doing, to talk about redesign and other things. But honestly, he's up for re-election in 2022. And it pains me to say, because as I said, I've known him for many years. I like him a lot as an individual. He means really well, but I just think he has the wrong vision for the Sunset. And
what about Connie?
Connie, this is just my personal opinion. Again, I like Connie. I think she's very well-meaning, trying to do the right thing. She won her election in 2020 by 150 votes.
Right. I was one of her campaign supporters. I know.
Yeah,
Connie.
well, so
I'm
she's
just wondering why you think she supports the closing of the Great Highway and the closing of JFK Park. The reason I'm asking is because other people, me and other people, want to talk to these guys and, talk to whoever we can and launch a campaign. I'm just trying to figure out what it would take, based on your contact with them, to maybe move them over a little bit.
You have to realize that pretty much all of the supervisors, especially the ones considered more progressive, when they ran for office, it was easy to say, yes, we need more bikes. Yes, we have to make San Francisco more bike reliant. And so, they really bought into all of this, not really realizing that at some point, if you're going to do it, you got to come up with a plan. And when you come up with that plan is when you start realizing how really impractical it is and how you are restricting access to whole groups of people. And so I think they're hoping that the political uproar is going to die down and they can come up with some fudged compromise that will just make this issue go away. But I don't think any of us will be happy with their compromise,
Well, when you point out to them that there is a lack of access, that the plan that they're supporting prevents the majority of people from getting access, what do they say?
They don't really acknowledge the point. They dodge, they say well-meaning things. Connie is better than Gordon. You know, Connie, when we met with her last week, she, and so some of the other people here were on that Zoom call. So anyone else who has a thought, chime in. But, you know, she was, I mean, I think she's more open to having the Great Highway open to some degree, probably closing it on the weekends. Probably maybe just Saturday and Sunday and not the Friday at noon and Monday at 6 a.m. You know, but then she goes and closes MLK Drive. When I told her, well, that's just contributing to your district being isolated transportation wise too. And so that messes with her. I think she was trying to get a compromise where she thought having this bike path to the sea would make some bicyclists happy. And, you know, again, like squeeze the balloon, it pops out somewhere else. And so they're just coming up with one proposal after another. And her proposal to allowing people to turn right to the west on 8th and then onto JFK and then go across the street into the museum area. No one is really in favor of that. If you look at the San Francisco Chronicle poll they just did that a lot of us weighed on, I mean, opening up the JFK had almost twice as many votes as closing it down or doing the compromise. And so it was 2-1. Yeah. So, I mean, good mobilizing there, Vin and other people. But, you know, that I think their back is to the wall, and that's a good place, in my view, for them to be, for us to get them to do something better, because Connie's going to need the support of people like her. I've told both of them, there are two types of angry people, those who live in your district and those who don't. And all those bike people that want you to close all these streets, they don't live in your district, but we do. And we're angry as hell. And you are going to pay a price if you don't figure something out here. I mean,
so do you think tactically that that's the best approach? Just point out to the fact that they're going to lose that they risk losing getting reelected, or that it's doing the wrong thing, or both? What do you think? I mean, you talked to him, just wondering up close and personal.
But increasingly we've been in ongoing dialogue with them for a while now about, you know, this is the wrong thing. You shouldn't do this. And so at the end of the day, politicians count votes, and Connie is very vulnerable. So is Gordon, I think. And, you know, a lot of the supervisors, it's not, unfortunately, it's not going to be good enough for them to just kind of be okay on this, because the other supervisors are going to yield to them. And so they need to be really clear with a tight plan and no waffling, because once it gets to the Board of Supervisors, it's up to 6 votes. At that point, the Bicycle Coalition, they're professionals at this stuff, you know, Walk SF, they have paid staff people. They've been at this for a while now, pushing up these guys. And that's why we're kind of playing catch up, in my view, and making them aware that there's another perspective here that you need to pay attention to, because we're getting organized too, you know, and we've got 14,000 people that signed that signature. You know, those 14,000 people could be a voter initiative that says, let's just open up everything to pre-pandemic levels.
That sounds like a good idea to me. One other
I sent Heather Knight an email. I said exactly that. These 14,000 signatures are almost enough to get on the ballot. And she wrote me back, said, thanks for telling me.
Right.
But she answered it.
I thought it was more than 14,000.
I said over 14,000.
Yeah, over 14,000.
Typically
And change.
15,000 signatures. Anyhow.
Well,
So-
Vin may have some ideas too about what we should do. He's got his hand up.
Okay, one other thing I'm going to mention before I call on the next person, if you're done, Jean.
Well, this is an endless conversation, but I'm done for the time being. Thank you.
We can come
Okay.
back to it.
I just wanted to mention that if they really want to give the cyclist a route across the city, they don't have to pick the main streets to cut off. If they're going to cut something off, the cyclist should be on the side streets, because there's plenty of room for them on the side streets. The people on the side streets don't want the cars on the side streets. They'd be much happier with the bicyclists on the side streets and pedestrians and all that. So what really needs to happen is the cars need to move independently of all that stuff on the main drive. That's what they need to do. So if they want to do anything, in my humble opinion, that would be the thing to do. Anyway, so
Yeah, can I interject before you go on to the next person? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
okay.
I just want to say the cyclist That'd be great to have on to divert people to the side streets or down the avenues or whatever and stuff rather than the Great Highway. But the problem is the majority of the cyclists don't want to act like cyclists. They think they're cars. And they also impede traffic going down the way and they cause problems and they don't get out anybody's way or they're jerky. They run stoplights, all sorts of stuff constantly. It's their mindset, their attitude that they need to redo. That's what's frustrating, even to most people who ride bicycles with them. And that's all I want to say. Sorry.
Okay, so is your name pronounced Paria?
No, no, that was.
Hi,
the
it's
Who?
my name's Paria. How are you?
Oh,
Thanks so
Paria.
much.
Go ahead.
Paria. Sure. So it's my first time at one of these meetings, so I just want to take a second to introduce myself. My name's Paria D. I work at the Fine Arts Museums, which is the De Young and the Legion of Honor. And I just wanted to, I'm really glad to hear that there's so many community members that are concerned about these road closures. I've definitely heard a lot from this community as well as others about the Great Highway. I really appreciated the feedback from Patricia and for Peter about about JFK Drive, and I just wanted to just say that I really appreciate the community support around that reopening. It's something that the museums are certainly concerned about access, about making sure that the museums are available and accessible to as many members of the community as possible. And that's, our goal and what we care about. And I really want an opportunity to connect with as many individuals as I can on here. I've spoken to Jean in the past a little bit before, and Tomasita's on this call as well, who I've spoken with. And I just wanted to share that interest. And I hope that that we could connect a bit on this with one another. So.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Oh, let's keep this going a little bit faster. I want to call on Michael's iPad. I tried to call on him a while ago and he keeps getting, would you like to speak, Michael, with the iPad?
Yeah, I just want to bring up one other point. I talked to Marna, the District 7 supervisor, and I pointed out the stupidity of the layout of the bike lanes that they're doing. I told her they took out a lane on Slope Boulevard, a traffic lane on Slope Boulevard. They put in a bike lane. Then they turned around 1 block away and put a bike lane on Ocean Avenue from 19th Avenue to Sunset Boulevard, which is where a bike lane should have been to begin with without taking out the traffic lane. And she didn't even know that there was a bike lane on Ocean Avenue. So, I just wanted to bring that point out, and that they really don't know what they're doing.
I couldn't agree with you more. They have these bike lanes that go into well, I didn't want to go there. The whole slurry thing they did on Potrero Boulevard, and then they just put that all over the city thinking that was a good idea. That is so dangerous in the rain at night. You can't even see where the lanes are. I mean, it's really dangerous. Okay, so I guess Judy, Ven, and then Rick.
Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Judy, and I live across the street from the Great Highway, and I spend almost every day writing to supervisors and opposing this. It's just my obsession. I cannot stand that they closed it ever. I think it should open permanently, all of the lanes. And I do disagree a little bit with what Stephen Hill said about saying that the walkway could be widened. I know that's a good compromise strategy, but in fact, now that just before they reopened it partially in August, they cleaned the area. And so I think the problem with the Great Highway not having room enough for everybody is simply a matter of maintenance, not a matter of rebuilding, because that pathway has 10 feet of pavement, 4 or 4.5 feet next to it of hard packed sand, and then on the other side another 2 feet. So when it's completely cleaned, like they just did it, and it runs the entire east side of the Great Highway, there is room for everybody to bicycle, to skateboard, to walk their dog, to elderly to walk, everything else. And if you look at every other road like Skyline Boulevard, you'll see that the bike lanes and the shoulders are one and the same. And there are big shoulders on the Great Highway on the east side and on the left side of the northbound and lane that can work as that. But I think as a compromise strategy, if there had to be one, we could say it would make sense to widen those shoulders to make a bona fide bicycle lane and maybe put some, sort of divider or, something that would shine up lights at night or, on the pavement so that you could see the division between a real bicycle lane. But the other thing I really want to talk about, and I do agree with the suggestion that that the bicycles are much better off on the side streets than on a main artery that's carrying 20,000 vehicles a day. And another point is that all night long, when there are no people, no bicycles, nobody's walking or recreating on the highway, the big rigs and the trucks and everybody's going by on that highway. They're using it. So it was used 24 hours. It wasn't used just 8 hours in nice weather when people are coming out for the weekend. And but the big thing that's going on that we haven't addressed in this meeting, and I'll try to be real quick about it, is that what's going to happen is the supervisors are most likely going to try to put through, or Park and Rec is, a temporary pilot program. And this is this is a really big, serious issue, because it means that the second the emergency order lifts, what they want to do is they want to turn this into a temporary pilot project. And by terming something a temporary pilot project, you are having access to a loophole that allows them to close a coastal road without an environmental impact report. And that is illegal. That is, they would never, ever have been able to close the Great Highway without securing a coastal development permit, which requires an environmental impact report, except that the mayor's emergency order overrode it. And so they were allowed to push through this bicycle agenda simply because of that. And so one of the things that Charlie Perkins and I have been trying to do is we've connected with the Coastal Commission rules and laws. And part of the reason that we are trying to fundraise and get money in the bank here is because we believe that once the Board of Supervisors votes on what they vote on, we are going to need to appeal that. And in order to appeal that, we're going to need very expensive counsel with specific knowledge of the Coastal Act and the CEQA laws. And we have gone through 36, 38 different attorneys, calling them, seeing who's available, who we can afford, who's willing to do it. And we have 2 or 3 that are kind of in the background if we ever got enough money to be able to pay them, that that we're hoping will help us on this. And so one of the reasons we don't want this temporary pilot project is this is the way that the city has been able to permanently close all the slow streets. They've closed Page Street by saying, it was just a pilot. And then what happens is a year goes by, 2 years go by, people manage to live without using that street. And then they say, well, you don't need it because you're not using it anyway. And they shouldn't be allowed to do this on the Great Highway. And so I would, I would urge us to all try to get some money in the bank so that we are prepared once this thing happens. And one of the reasons it's going down like this, and Peskin is one of the supervisors who used to work for the Coastal Commission, is a couple of years ago, the Coastal Commission delegated some of their authority to San Francisco City Planning. And so city planning has the ability to close to issue their own permit in a way. And RPD and MTA are working very, very hard behind the scenes with Scott Wiener and some of these other supervisors to see how they can do this without an environmental impact report, and what they can do to make this happen. And they can throw it into a temporary pilot project without an environmental impact report. So we've got like a hair of a chance that maybe the Coastal Commission might step up and help us appeal it, or appeal it on their own because they don't really agree with it. But we can't depend on that. We need to be prepared. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll talk about that later if you like. You can, I know Charlie, he can email me about that. We can think about getting support for that. So Ben and then Rick.
Oh, hey, thanks. My name is Vin. I am a volunteer with Open the Great Highway. Just a quick question. I'm sort of new to the city, actually the state. So I'm not really familiar with your organization. Like how many members, what sort of reach do you have? Can you sort of give me that synopsis?
Well, basically this is sponsored by the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods. And we are an organization that is made up of other neighborhood groups, like 20 to 30 groups at any given time. And so I don't know what else to say about it right now. We've been for a long time invested in the idea of, I'm going to not use the word preserve or any of that kind of stuff because that's bad to say now. But basically protecting the neighborhood one group at a time. And we do it as a neighborhood organization or set up of different organizations. So in my case, I'm in the Mission. And some other people are, quite a few of the people are, I believe, on the west side now, because the east side has been so inundated by the overload of housing and density that people have just sort of given up over on this side of the city to a large extent. But so more of the action is actually happening on the west side right now, I believe, because you still got something to fight for. We've sort of been inundated quite a bit over here. But does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
Yes, I do. How could this organization help Open the Great Highway spread the message and build up support?
Well, we've been working on it for a few months now. We have various members and we bring these things up to them. And I've written, as the Land Use Transportation Committee Chair, I've written a few letters on behalf of the organization. So that's basically and we get our members to write letters, and member groups to write letters, and their members to write letters. And, that's sort of how we operate right now. And in my particular case, we're trying to educate people who don't know, what's going on. So hopefully you're learning something tonight.
I am, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, so Rick, you're muted.
Sorry, unmuted now. First, a couple of things, but first, just a heads up to Judy and what she's looking at, and that is, I think there was, I don't know what the state bill was, but I think there was a state bill passed this year, and I think Wiener was probably behind it, that basically exempts transportation projects from CEQA.
What?
Yeah. So look into that, Judy, before you get your hopes up too much on being able to use CEQA in this fight. That was one. Second, it's great to hear you guys. I'm from Potrero Hill, so I normally wouldn't be part of this conversation, except that Mary asked me to present on the initiative at the start of it. I'm happy to hear all this data you've gathered, but I need to point out, and I think you already know it, but I'll point it out again, that, you know, politicians don't listen to data. Our city departments don't listen to data and studies and logical arguments. They listen to political power. And so I congratulate you on your 14,000 signatures and being able to hopefully mobilize those people in the future. And I'd like to make a suggestion, since that 14,000 and the Stop the Great Highway Coalition, or whatever you're calling yourselves, seems to have gained some critical mass, at least locally. What I'd like to suggest you do, I don't want to divert you from your focus, but at least think about expanding that group into something. I mean, for years, Mary and I have you know, torn our hair out about the Bicycle Coalition and their power and what they're doing. Just think of it, if you could transform the power you've got from this coalition into something else. And I'll just call it, you know, in the past, I've always wanted San Francisco to have a drivers coalition. Not a good word. But if you transform this into something like a mobility coalition, where you wrapped in the drivers, you wrapped in the disability advocates, and you reached more impacted neighbors. I mean, right now, you're a local group of West Side impacted neighbors. But, you know, if you wrapped in impacted neighbors, because we all have our impacts that are all due to the same crap, you know, throughout the city, you might be able to gain enough political power to essentially balance out the terrible Bicycle Coalition. End of speech.
Is that your interpretation from what you see from us publicly?
It's my interpretation from what I hear on this call.
Okay.
But I, you know, and I see a few articles here and there, but, you know, frankly, you know, and I don't want the Great Highway closed, but, you know, I've got my own fights. So, I mean, I'm fighting everything. So I don't pay a lot of attention to it, but I'm really glad there's a group that's focused on it. And I'd just like to see you gain even more citywide political power, because that's what it's got to be about.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yes, and we also have to find people to run for office. That's a really big deal, I think. If you're going to vote any of these people out of office, you have to replace them. So that to me would be the number one thing that people should consider. Who could be a leader? Who we agree with?
Woman.
A woman, huh?
No, I said Ben.
I'm sorry, what?
Somebody that we really all want, not who they get elected in or they're handed the title.
Well, there's been, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens in the next few months, because we're getting ready to have musical chairs at City Hall, in case anybody hasn't heard about it.
Well, you know, I'd be interested in, Rick, I mean, which, are there other organizations that you would recommend that we touch base with to, you know, when you talk about creating citywide power, what organizations are you thinking of? And then Tomasita, is she still on the call? Did she leave? Because she said she was part of the effort to stop the closure in 2007. So I'm wondering what organizations were instrumental in stopping that closure in 2007.
Go ahead, Tomasita. You're muted.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really glad to hear everybody for your brilliant ideas. To give a little history, I grew up in the Sunset, and my mother took me to Golden Gate Park every day before I went to school, before I started school. And anyway, so I have a long interaction with the park. And back in those days, every evening we used to cruise down what is now drive, you know, and the little bunnies would be along the road and we'd throw bread to them. But anyway, so the Young Museum was damaged in the earthquake of 1989. And they determined that it would be better to build a new museum instead of trying to patch up the old museum. So about that time, the Bicycle Coalition and David Miles, when his rollerblader group, or just pretty much David Miles, because there weren't many more besides himself roller skating around there. They started pressuring the trustees to move out of the park under the basis of get out of the park because the museums bring cars to the park, and we don't want cars in the park, and the people of San Francisco don't want cars in the park. And anyway, so I founded the Keep the DeYoung in the Park Coalition. And that's how I got to know the this organization, Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, because the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods was one of the members of the Keep the DeYoung in the Park Coalition. And it became an organ, you know, I was very skinny from never eating and just working on this out of my home from 6 in the morning to midnight every day. But I went around to union groups, union caucuses, church groups, neighborhood groups, all these wonderful groups in people's garages. And anyway, so we built this citywide coalition, Keep the DeYoung in the Park coalitions. So because of the pressure that was put on them by these people that wanted the museums out of the park, the trustees actually voted twice to move out of Golden Gate Park. But we had built up so much citywide support by going to all these neighborhood groups and having events like forums that were covered by some newspapers. And back then, the DeYoung family descendants still owned the Chronicle. So the Chronicle was more progressive and covered our demonstrations, which in the case of one of them was, I belonged to an Aztec dance group, and we had a Aztec ceremony in front of the DeYoung before they took the trustees took the second vote to move out of the park. And I'm just giving you history because you'll never hear it anywhere else ever again. So I'm just giving you the backstory. So everybody deserves to know. Anyways, so the first time they voted to move out of the park, they were at the Legion, but a paralegal friend of mine had noticed that they did not put the full notice of what the resolution they were going to vote, that whereas we want to move out of the park. So I served them with legal notice that morning. I faxed to them that I would sue them if they approved the move out of the park, because they did not properly notice it according to the Brown Act. And so they went ahead and voted for it anyway to move out of the park. But then they found out that indeed it was correct, that that was an illegal vote. So then 2 weeks later, they had their executive committee had a meeting to vote to move out of the park. And so at this point, the Chronicle covered it and wrote an article. And anyway, so I'm just pointing out that the Chronicle is now owned by the Hearst family. And so the Hearst Foundation, you know, is the Hearst Foundation. It's just like people forget that KTVU is part of Fox, is the Fox network. So anyways, so we built up citywide support, and we were gathering signatures on a petition, and it's in somebody's safe. We had thousands and thousands of petitions to put it on the ballot. And so we became so viable that the great granddaughter of Michael DeYoung paid for a poll, and we found out we had 72% citywide support to keep the museum in Golden Gate Park. So then our volunteer political consultant, who was on the board of one of our core members organization, which was Coleman Advocates for Youth and Children, he talked to their political consultant, and we had negotiations up in Clint Riley's office. And anyways, so they agreed to stay in the park on condition that there would be a garage, because the bicyclists are always saying they don't want cars in the park. And so this is back in 1996. And so that agreement was made. And so they agreed to rebuild the DeYoung Museum in Golden Gate Park, even though the board had voted twice to move out of it. which I'm telling this just for background, but also because people need to know that, yes, we can win this. You know, if we get the word out throughout the city, if people start paying attention, if we have events that draw attention and draw the media. And I have been told that Shaman Walton wrote an editorial when this first came out in opposition to the road closure, and the Chronicle refused to publish it.
Wow.
As we can see, all the coverage is coming from Heather Knight, and she writes opinion pieces. She does not do reporting, you know, and so this is not journalism. This is, you know, advocacy to make the park for exclusive use of the bicyclists. And that's what they're asking for, exclusive use. And so after that, as they were so outraged that we won, because, you know, we were fighting them to keep the DeYoung in Golden Gate Park, to rebuild it in Golden Gate Park so that families could introduce their children to art in the park instead of at the Embarcadero, which would be life-threatening to all these families going to take their children to, because the chairman of the board wanted to put it along across the street from her. You know, she owns North Point Shopping Center, so they would have put it by Pier 39 around there, and that would have been dangerous to families, and you know, instead of moving it up from its original location. Anyway, so they were so outraged that we won that battle and that the museum was built in the park. And by saving the DeYoung Museum from being moved out of the park, we were able to save the Academy of Sciences location, because if the DeYoung was forced to move out of the park, the Academy of Sciences would have been forced to move out of the park, because they put much less resistance up than the DeYoung. The DeYoung carries the load of this fight. As you can see by going to the California Academy of Sciences website, I understand it has this this piece on it that says, we don't object to the road being closed. We just want a process, a proper process to be followed. So they're already surrendering without even starting a fight. And so, so then they were pushing for the road to be closed on Saturday. Well, let me explain. Since 1964, the bicyclists have exclusive use of John F. Kennedy Drive every Sunday and every holiday of the year. And what they were demanding then is they wanted the road they wanted it on Saturday as well. Well, I come from a working class family. My parents were exhausted on the weekends after working 2 jobs, and they didn't want to ride a bicycle on their days off. They wanted to drive through the park and enjoy the park. And so having had that experience, I feel I can advocate for working class families from throughout the Bay Area who just want to drive through the park and maybe pull over and have a picnic, or pull over and look at the roses, or, you know, the park belongs to everyone. It doesn't just belong to elite people who can earn their living at a computer and want to have a workout on weekends or the rest of the week. And the fight then was to not have a Saturday road closure, because that's what we were fighting over. And when Connie Chan addressed either the committee last week or addressed the full board, I think I didn't go to that. No, so it was when she addressed the land use committee, she said, this went on the ballot twice, and unfortunately it was defeated. So I remember that campaign because there was, we had one, the bicyclists had one that says, you know, so anyway, it was vote yes on D and no on E or something like that, because we had competing initiatives. But the bottom line was that the people of San Francisco wanted to keep JFK Drive open, you know, on Saturdays. We were just talking about Saturdays then. But anyways, but then at some point, we had negotiated a settlement, and that settlement was negotiated and signed by I had started a new coalition called Park Access for All. And I went around and got it was all the institutions in the park, and it was all these people like the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods and other organizations throughout the city. And so that was the new coalition. It was called Park Access for All. And we had many members from the disability community. The ARC was very, very helpful. And so then I demanded—
Which organization was that? ARC?
ARC.
ARC.
It was founded as the Association for Retarded Citizens, but then now it's just called the ARC. And it had, the executive director was very, we worked together very well. And so when we had demanded this meeting with Mayor Newsom, he kept us waiting for hours. And we had 60 people from organizations and around the city. And we had, a lawyer, a paraplegic lawyer with a tube out of his throat, talking through a, tube out of his neck. And, a lot of people in wheelchairs and anyway, so Gavin Newsom didn't want to come into the room, but so Phil Ginsburg came in and said, he's really busy. He really can't meet with you. And I said, look, he committed that he would meet with us, and we're not leaving here until he comes in and meets with us.
Okay,
So he-
Thomasina, we're coming up on 2 hours here, so I wonder what would be really helpful if you could generate a list of organizations.
Excuse me, I was gonna may I finish? Anyway,
Well, Rick is also waiting to talk about organizations too, and we're almost going to 2 hours here.
Yeah, I think we have to wrap this up pretty soon. Could you write this up, Thomasita, and we'll just put the history of it somewhere where we can share it with people?
We have Stephen and we have me, and I'm trying to revive the Park Access for All Coalition. So I'm gonna put my information in the chat, and if you want.
Yes, that's great.
Just contact me tomorrow, okay? And then we'll work together with everybody else here too, like Stephen and everyone. It's okay, but
Okay.
a way to reach me so we can start gathering together.
It's really exciting what you're saying,